Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called So Others May Live, written by Firefighter Raven. Tribune Julian Marlaxia sat at the bar, lost in his thoughts and practically unaware of his surroundings, or as unaware as a combat veteran can be. He held a small hollow medallion in one big fist. His drink was still practically full, which was unheard of happening to his first drink. He wasn't even consciously aware of these eyes of all the patrons trying to discreetly glance at him, hoping for one of his stories or his collection of bad human jokes. Dad jokes, he called them. But Kyril and Tequan took advantage of their positions as fellow instructors and approached the Tribune. "Joe, are you okay? You don't seem like yourself," Kyril asked. Tribune Marlaxia came back from that faraway place and his thoughts had taken him. The two instructors sat down on either side of him and ordered their drinks. Tequan pointed at the small device in his hand. "What do you have there?" Tequan asked. Julian opened his hand and replied, "Something a friend gave me a few years ago." "The hollow medallion? What's on it?" Kyril asked. Julian pushed the button to activate it. An image of himself standing between two humans, his forearms on their heads, and all three smiling. It changed to another one, and this time the two humans were standing on boxes, and all three were laughing. The last saw all three in the front of a dropship. The two humans were dressed as pilots, and Julian was in his battle gear. You could faintly see other humans boarding the shuttle in the background. "Who are they?" Kyril asked. "The one on the left is Flight Lieutenant Marcus Corvine, and Flying Officer Jester Jejene DeWitt, a.k.a. Trip of the Terran Navy," Julian said. "They were the pilots of the shuttle that pulled myself and my remaining soldiers off that damned ledge on Raza 6, Julian continued. "I became close friends with them after I volunteered to be part of an exchange of Coalition and Terran officers to learn how each other do things," Jelaine stated before continuing, "and begin to strengthen the bonds started on Raza 6. Jelaine paused before continuing. "I also learned that they weren't combat pilots, but what the humans called search and rescue. Of course, they can and do fly combat missions, but their main job was SNR, as they sometimes called it. I learned their actions on Raza 6 was just one of their functions." Jelaine looked around the room, noticing for the first time how quiet it was. The entire bar was trying to catch his words. He shrugged and turned in his seat, facing the rest of the room. Easier to just tell them than have them trying to eavesdrop. Jelaine spoke a little louder. "They also searched wreckage for survivors of space battles, evacuate wounded, assist with accidents, or even help civilians look for people missing in the wild. And I also learned just how high the casualty rate is amongst their crews," Jelaine said. Kyril asked, "Why is that?" Jelaine looked around. "Just because they aren't combat pilots, don't underestimate their bravery," he continued. "They perform their duties in the middle of battle. Marcus told me SNR units had a motto that had been used for centuries." Jelaine paused before finishing. "Haec faximus ut alae vivant. As it turns out, I didn't understand the meaning like I thought I did." One of the cadets raised a hand. "What does that motto mean?" it asked. "I'll get to that later on," Jelaine replied. "About 12 cycles ago, or a little over 3 of their years, there was an emergency beacon from a small colony in the portrayed sector. Parents 2. There wasn't much there. It was mostly just to mine berstrium crystals. Their local star started emitting 3 times the normal amount of cosmic radiation, and it was only a matter of time before it overwhelmed the colony's radiation shielding and killed everyone on the planet. The humans responded to that call with one of their long-range explorer ships," Jelaine continued. "Their active radiation shielding let them survive much higher doses of cosmic radiation than most other ships," Jelaine continued. "It also had enough room to carry the entire population of the colony in one trip. They added 15 more dropships to the ship's normal complement of 5. Of course, my friends volunteered to go." Jelaine paused, noticing that every head was turned his way. "I learned all of the pilots were volunteers. 20 ships meant 40 pilots. Why, I have trouble imagining many other races getting that many volunteers for such a dangerous mission." One of the cadets raised his tentacle. Yes, Wesso. Ghislaine acknowledged the cadet.
Why was it so dangerous? They weren't flying combat, just picking up colonists,
Wesso asked. Ghislaine paused to gather his thoughts. While the explorer ship was well shielded, the dropships were not. Ghislaine continued. They had to add more passive radiation shielding in the cargo hold to protect the colonists on the way up. But this severely reduced the number of passengers it could carry to around 100 people. Then the shielding could enclose the dropship's cockpit, Ghislaine said. This meant getting the roughly 50,000 colonists off the planet meant each shuttle had to make around 25 down and back runs, with each taking 45 minutes in human time, or 7.5 sectocs in our system. It also meant the rapidly increasing levels of cosmic radiation exposure would begin to exceed what the cockpit and pilot's armor could keep out. Ghislaine looked around. Despite this, they had more than enough volunteers to crew the ship, fly the jumpsuits, work the hangars, and handle the colonists. I met up with them at Acronia space station a few days after the mission was finished. Both of them were looking slightly pale, even for humans. They brushed it off as just being tired from the last mission, and all the craziness getting back here, Ghislaine said, a look of sadness on his face. We talked about the mission, and they told me how crazy it was, making multiple planetfalls at maximum speed that could be safe for planetary entry. As Marcus called it, an express elevator to hell. 2 dropships were lost when they made entry in the wrong angle. Just a degree or 2 off was enough to tear them apart. Ghislaine paused before continuing. This happened late in the evacuation, so it's thought fatigue caused them to crash. My friends ended up picking up 3 more trips down and back, 3 more times to absorb radiation that had risen above the level of shielding for the dropships. But they got it done with minimal losses. 50,000 colonists evacuated, the cost of 14 pilots and crew lost to accidents, Ghislaine said. The ship's decontamination facility was overwhelmed, so they're still processing colonists, and the dropships were so radioactive that they had to be ejected and autopiloted towards the planet to destroy them. Ghislaine took a pull from his drink before setting it down and continuing. It was a mere matter of months before the dropship crews began getting sick. The amount of radiation absorbed had begun to cause mutations in their DNA, and caused a new form of cancer that was resistant to all the usual methods of treatment. One by one, they began to die off. Julian paused to look at the hollow medallion. My friend, Flying Officer Douai, passed 2 years ago. My other friend, Right Lieutenant Corvine, was the last surviving pilot when I stepped into the medical center to visit him a dozen rotations ago, Ghislaine said. After the usual chatting between old friends, he asked if he would still volunteer that day if he knew this would happen. He gave me this weird look and pointed to a sign hung on the wall. It was covered in the signatures from the other SNR crews, and the middle contained the SR name and insignia. Below those were the words Hayek Faximus ut alive vivant. It was from an old Terran language called Latin. These things we do that others may live. When I first heard that, I thought it was just words. I was very wrong. Ghislaine looked at the image again, with a sad smile. Marcus told me we all knew it was a death sentence from the start. That is why we only used 20 volunteers for that part of the mission. They could have rotated more pilots in, but that would have just increased the number of casualties in the long run. And then, he told me, he had no regrets about turning their motto into actions. Ghislaine paused, looking like he had to force the next words out. He died last rotation. His commanding officer informed me of it earlier in the day. He also wanted to tell me there would be a memorial service for him and the rest of the other pilots, and he hoped I'd attend. Tyrell looked at Ghislaine. Go, I'll cover your classes. Tequin spoke up, and I will as well. Thank you, my friends, Ghislaine said before reaching for his drink. He raised his glass. A toast to my friends and the other pilots. All around the bar, glasses were raised. That others may live, Ghislaine spoke, before draining his glass. Everyone in that bar repeated the phrase and took a drink. That others may live. End of story. I would like to thank our T5 members and patrons, Caspar Arnholtz, John Creighton, Vidmori, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.